All right, ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen, the session, according to the plan of the organizer, is for us to have this as a panel session. Simultaneously, we're expected to have Professor Saibu, Professor Adewuyi, and Professor Semiu Bello interact on different approach to scholastic research. So since we have Professor Olufemi Saibu with us, I would like to start with him. For the next 1 hour, 30 minutes, we're going to be asking questions across three major contents. First, housekeeping activities, talking about what to do to prepare ahead towards writing a scholastic research. We get the view of Professor Saibu and the two other facilitators. Then we move to content, which has to do with introduction and literature review, methods, and of course, the results. Then finally, we go into conclusion and general overview of scholastic academic research. So this is what we're going to be doing in the next 1 hour, 30 minutes. And after that, after they might have shared their thoughts, professional thoughts in this case, we will be entertaining questions from everyone. We have the notion that it is possible that there might be things that our resource persons might have left out. So we will give us opportunity to ask questions. By that time, we can either drop the message in the chat box or please use the raise hand feature so that it will be very well coordinated. On that note, thank you very much. I want to please ask Professor Olufemi to please unmute himself while I need him to impress on us on the topic, particularly housekeeping activity, as I mentioned, which is the first one to delve into. What are the things researchers should have in mind in terms of preparation to be put forward in writing scholastic academic research? You have the floor, sir.
Okay. So what I first of all want to appreciate Fountain University management from beginning to today. I'm part of that university and I'll continue to be part of it and be proud of it. So I see this one as a very great landmark and something that maybe everybody must support as well. We have been looking forward to when Fountain University also will register its name at the postgraduate level, having done so much at undergraduate level as well. So I see it as a very great contribution to academics, to scholars development and other areas as well, and community development, as Prof have said as well. So regarding the topic today, and especially with respect to the housekeeping, as you mentioned as well, that what we need to do if we are to prepare for academics work as well. So the first thing we want us to have as an academics is, number one, we must have what we call research philosophy. So research philosophy, that you must have a belief. There is something we believe in, just like we know as a human being, we have faith in certain things, even when it's unseen and co. So we, as an academics, as a scholar, as a researcher, you must have your own perspectives, your own philosophy about research. And whether you go to what they call the positivism, realism, or interpretism as well. That is, whether you believe that, oh, you want to do research on basis of what has happened in the past, and you want to also to look at what is happening currently in the future, and that's positivism again. And in that case, you want to use existing information to explain and predict the future. So is that the approach you want to be following? And from beginning, you are going to academics or to research, you must decide from beginning that this is going to be your own perspectives. This way you are going to look at things, this way approach you are going to follow. So once you are able to build internally the way you perceive academics, the way you perceive research to be, then automatically that will guide you. It's a torchlight that you use to see into the darkness when you begin to do the work. So in that way, you will not be swinging from one place to the other. Oh, somebody is writing about philosophy, or someone's writing in law. You want to use the style they are using in law. Oh, let me also use the style they are using in philosophy. Oh, let me go to engineering when I'm in social sciences as well. So many people who fell into that area is because personally they do not have their own academic research and scholarship philosophy. So you must, from beginning, this is my own perspective how research should be done. Number two is that we also must understand that we must also have in our own system, what kind of research design do we have capacity to do, or we want to build in ourselves as well. And you must also decide from beginning, oh, I'm following these perspectives in terms of my research design. This way I will be writing my own background to the study. This is where I want to argue my case. Do I start from general to specific, or do I start maybe creating the scenarios, or do I like maybe use established information, or do I like my own again, maybe a link with somebody's position as well. So for us to be able to have our own, at least, identity, create your own niche, you must have your own approach to present issues at background. And also in terms of statement of problem again, you also must again be able to have the way you want to present the problem and be able to create a lot of approach as well. So as a researcher, you must be able to create an identity for yourself through your belief, through your approach to creating your research design. How do I collect data? How do I go about it as well? And finally, you also must be able to have your own specific way of your research communication. How do I have to communicate at least my research to the public, to my colleagues as well, and to those people who I'm doing the research for, the beneficiaries as well, and also the benefactors, those who provide funds for us. So I believe that the first of all, the in-house cleaning is for us to be able to identify who you are, what you are, and then what you really want people to see in you by defining your research philosophy, your research design, and research communication. Some of us may say, okay, well, I prefer to discuss my research among the academic community. And I know from that, when they pick it up, they cannot communicate to the policy cycle. Oh, I really want to focus directly on policy cycles and make sure at least I get to them again. Oh, my focus is to focus on industry as well, or a combination of all. And then which medium or media will I use to be able to get attention as well? Before you go into this profession, you must have that clear cut in your mind, and you must be consistent with approach you are taking so that people will know you that, oh, this is the approach that this person is doing. So in doing these three, I've mentioned now, so you must therefore have some things in your mind. You must be intentional about it. Intentional, maybe you are not doing it because others are doing it. You must be deliberate and you must be determined. Oh, I want to do this and I'm following this approach. Indeed, I used to encourage my students. If I have a PhD student that every time he comes, we agree and go, I usually ask them, that's not my student. I want a student that come to me and bring a topic and say, this topic is rubbish, and tell me it's not rubbish, sir. And I ask why. And he able to explain, to defend it as well. I said, no, you are wrong. He said, no, I'm not wrong. It's you that did not understand me. That shows an intentional approach. Okay, this is what I want to do. I'm ready to go extra mile to get that done, but I cannot change it because that is not what I'm on. And that's what I mean by intentional. It's not maybe because you meet your supervisor today, he said, oh, that topic is rubbish. You say, okay, what do I do? You give another topic. Tomorrow you come, so that's the rubbish. And now again, you are now beginning to float, like maybe like a leaf on water as well. So you must definitely have it in your mind and determined about yourself. This is what I'm going to do, and you must be deep into it. Purposeful, again, you must be purposeful. That is, you must have a reason for doing it. And that reason must something that have value to be created for you and then for others as well. And like I mentioned, there are three people who are involved in any research. The benefactor, those who provide facility for you, the beneficiary, those who have to benefit from it, and again, you, the researcher. So each of these three categories must have a reason for being part of that project, including your supervisor and the university here as well. And that's the purpose. Why am I doing this? Is it just for promotion? Is it for me to get attention? Is it because I have resources? So you must have a reason. And that reason was something that is valuable, that will add to your life, and again will lead to a value creation and contribution to knowledge, to policy, to practice as well. Once you have that, that should be your motivation that will ginger you every time to do the needful. Then again, you also must be critical and analytical. I used to say it as well. When you do a paper or a research work, even a thesis, and you do not come up with a result that is that shake the table, then there's a problem. That you do not come with a result that bring something different from what is generally believed, then again, that means you are just, then what's the purpose of your work? It means the existing studies is even better than your do. So when you are doing a research, you must be critical. Critical is not really, does not mean destructive. And if it's going to be destructive, must be productive destruction as well. You must come up with something that look at the existing system, existing studies, existing practice, and come out with something that is unique, that will give you an edge over existing something as well. Analytical is that your work must be deep in terms of scope and depth as well. We have seen a situation when you see some thesis, when you remove just a paper from a thesis that somebody is presenting for PhD, that's all. So and at times what some of our students nowadays are doing is that by the time they do this diagnostic test, they believe that maybe they have done sensitivity test. No, if you are looking at a particular topic as well, you create different scenarios. You look at different issues as well, and you begin to now subject your result to different scenarios that you can have. And then again, you consider it from the aggregate level, then the disaggregate level as well. You break your data into different groups to be able to see whether maybe by breaking the data to different groups, we generate different results. And that is now you are doing you are becoming analytical. You are analyzing in a very deeper way, and then in terms of scope and depth as well. And also, you must be original. Originality does not mean you are bringing something new that nobody ever done in the world. I'm not sure there's anything that you are going to do now that something would not have done it, because you must build on something that is existing. So you must bring out something. In economics, we call it marginal contribution as well. There is something you are adding to that. That little one you are adding is what is your originality. So there's no law that say you cannot adopt, adapt, or modify existing approach, existing something. There is something that say maybe you cannot replicate what somebody have done, but when you are doing that, you must be able to say, this is you in this. This is them in this. So that is originality. Something must be specific to you that people can pick and say, this is your own work here. So originality is saying that we must be able to see your contributions to knowledge. We must be able to see your contribution to policy. We must see your contribution to practice as well. That, these are the way you can. So those three aspects are key as well: knowledge, policy, and practice, which we normally call theoretical, empirical, and policy as well. So you can look at it that way. How am I contributing to knowledge? What are the new methods I've adopted that, again, people can copy me, you can use me? We have a situation whereby we use somebody's method as well. We just use it verbatim. And know when they want to cite, even despite that they are looking at your thesis for this work, rather than citing you, they will go and cite the original source where you have it, because you have not done anything to that model. You have not added anything to it as well. So originality starts even from the way you motivate your statement of problem. What are the issues you are bringing in that existing study have not done? What are the approach you are adopting to examine that new issues that you have not done before? How you can create an hybrid between them. You can do a blend, and you can even develop a new methodology by looking at what other disciplines are doing that you can bring on board into your own as well. So originality does not mean doing everything anew and fresh and from others. Scientific is that you must follow a process. Scientific research is a structured process that when you do it, somebody should be able to replicate what you have done, to be able to confirm what you have done is correct or not, or to be able to adopt your method to another scenarios to see whether your something is applicable to different scenarios. But when your work is not scientific, there is no systematic approach you follow. Again, there could be a problem. We have seen some papers where, they said they are doing even literature review, which is acceptable, but literature review again have some process at which they do literature review as a scientific write-up. So you can also engage in the one that require data analysis as well. Your sources of data must be well defined. Where you get it as well, the manipulation you do to those data must be clearly stated, such that other people again can follow you. And again, you must not deny the sources where you have those data as well. And so when you follow that approach, then you are being scientific as well. So again, so being purposeful, I think, so in order to waste time, so be purposeful, like I mentioned, let your thought process have a clarity, envision the objective of research as well. And again, in critical, like I said, you must be logical, and then you must be inquisitive in your thought. And again, you must express yourself in the way you present your program, and then you must allow people to be able to have a feedback to your work, and everything you do, you must be consistent as well. So also in terms of originality, like I mentioned as well, one must be able to see the gap you are filling. So then the scientific as well. So what do we mean by multidisciplinary research? So the multidisciplinary research is when you are looking at one issue and you ask different disciplines to look at the same issues from their own perspectives. And in that case, you want to look at it from different perspectives. Yeah, I'm looking, for instance, now, I'm looking at, let me say, as an economist now, I want to look at maybe the current exchange rate challenges we have in currency depreciation, currency exchange we have in Nigeria today. It's not purely economic issue. Sociology can look at it in terms of the attitude of people to foreign goods, and then they now explain how such attitude affect exchange rate. A psychology person can look at it in terms of maybe the way people think as well. Same thing as well, political scientists also can look at it in terms of maybe governance, how it affects that. And people in science as well can look at it in terms of, number one, the technology that have been adopted in terms of maybe determining at least the forex and so on and so forth. They can look at it in terms of maybe the kind of goods we produce in Nigeria as well. So when you allow different people to look at how at least a particular topic is addressed, then it's multidisciplinary. And in terms of interdisciplinary, in this case, on a single thing as well, you incorporate all those ones together simultaneously, not maybe allowing them to look at it individually. So in that case, you are looking at one issue, incorporating all the methods into that issues. And recently now, the two approaches are now being encouraged, that indeed it's becoming difficult for you to single-handedly do a paper that is very big and looking at it from one single perspective, and you get tractions and attention. So in this world now, for anybody to make inroad as well, we must try as much as able to collaborate. If as I'm an economist now, if I'm doing a research now, I can go to a mathematician to help me to build the model. After doing the model, I can go to somebody who's a programmer in computer sciences again to help me turn into maybe something at least in terms of programming. After that again, I can look at the impact of that thing on the environment and go to the environmental sciences as well. And after that, I may want to build a kind of a hub that can do that again. So in doing that, I'm now bringing everybody together to address one single issue I'm doing as well. And definitely that will allow us to address the issues in all those perspectives that we are bringing in as well and make it to be acceptable, because there's no issue today that can be resolved from one single approach as well. So in conclusion, at least for now, is that as a scholar, and for us to have a meaningful contributions, number one, we must have our own perspective to things. How do we want to carry out our research? What is our thinking, our belief, and what are our assumptions upon which our research is based? So I used to tell my students, nobody can tell you are wrong, but someone said maybe he disagree with you. But when somebody you are wrong, then again, you should take an objection to that. What you need to do for you to be able to do that, you must state your assumptions. You must let them know what you believe in. You must let them know from perspective where you are looking at that issues. When you state your perspectives, you state your assumptions, you state the approach you're adopting, anybody that want to talk about that, we definitely either say, oh, he or she does not agree with this assumption, or he has a different perspective to look at it again. And beyond that, again, we also must build our own niche for ourselves. how do I go about my research? And you must have a well-thought, designed approach I want to do. You must have your research design, how you want to be carrying out your research. And again, that must be unique to you. Not necessarily not relating to what others have done, but you must be able to create your own. And finally, you also must have ways of communicating your research, and you must determine who is your audience from beginning. And beyond that, again, in doing all this, you must be intentional, you must be purposeful, you must be scientific as well, and always you must also ensure that as well there is a value you are creating as well. So empowering the next generation of researchers is really important, and definitely we cannot do it alone again. So we must seek collaborations with others and again expand our possibilities so that at the end of the day, our work will not just only be in the shelf of our supervisors, or maybe even in our website alone, but rather than it be something that will be used to solve a problem. And finally, the idea that I am publishing to have high impact, therefore we tend to avoid analyzing issues that affect our immediate environment. I really want us now to begin to look at the issues that affect our immediate environment. That how do we explain it? That I'm a lecturer, I'm a professor at University of Lagos. I have not done any study that relate to Bariga and Akoka. And yet I'm studying China, I'm studying Turkey, I'm studying other countries as well. And that then, because I'm only looking for international recognitions when I'm becoming irrelevant in my environment. And I think we should also do deepen our research by looking at the issues that affect our immediate community. Indeed, we make greater impact with that. And again, one day, somebody will recognize that impact globally, and what we are looking for from global, we can get it from our local environment as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir, for that amazing introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the opening remark from our first facilitator, Professor Olufemi M. Saibu. Like I mentioned earlier, we are making this more like a panel session where we get the view of our resource person across board for each section, particularly as it relates to their discipline. I'll quickly go to Dr. Semiu Bello now. So still the same question I asked Professor Saibu about housekeeping activity, particularly as I want to relate to your field, because one of the things we want to take away from this session today is to speak to different academic areas. We understand that we have people in the sciences, social sciences, humanities, among others. So according to your own field, I would appreciate if you can localize it as or domesticate as much as possible. What are the housekeeping activities a researcher should have in mind in terms of things to prepare against writing or conducting a scholastic research? You have the floor, sir.
All right, thank you very much. The anchor person. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Semiu Bello from the Department of Mass Communication, Olabisi Onabanjo University, Abeokuta. Let me start to first appreciate the Vice Chancellor in absentia, Professor Olayinka Ramota Karim, who, according to the Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies, is unavoidably absent. And of course, to the Dean himself, School of Postgraduate Studies, Professor Abdulatif Usman, I want to sincerely appreciate you for these efforts and for creating this laudable and commendable platform for conversation in research endeavor. And of course, to the Sub-Dean School of Postgraduate Studies, Dr. Ayinde Taufik, I also like to extend my sincere appreciation to you, particularly for bringing me on board to share my thoughts on this conversation. Like the anchor person rightly said, of course, within the confines of a rudiments of a scholarly research and a multidisciplinary approach. Of course, for the housekeeping activities, let me start from what I call going into research. Of course, I have a preceding slide, but I think for the purpose of this conversation, I would like to go straight to this particular slide. Going into research, like we have indicated here, once we say research or a scholarly research, Of course, you're also referring to an academic endeavor. So in this situation now, before we go into research, I often advise research scholars, research students, and of course, research practitioners to always have in mind, approach to research. From my experience and my exposure, I've been able to identify two approaches to research. The first one is what I call administrative approach, and the second one is a critical approach. I always recommend the critical approach to research, because in critical approach, it is usually more robust and of course they're quite fantastic than administrative approach. But how do I mean by this nomenclature? So when you adopt an administrative approach in your research endeavor, that is a situation where you get to see a researcher, whether a research student, a research scholar, or a practitioner, coming up with a title at the beginning of the research. That level, the researcher has come up with a title, the research objectives, hypothesis, even suggesting the theoretical framework and even methodology. I often call this an administrative approach to research. And this is not usually going to bring the best out of that research, because our research title, tentative or final, is expected to be informed by the literature. But I get to see research students coming up with a research title. I ask, how did you come about this title? And some of the responses would range from, I just feel like I want to do something in this regard. And this is not usually the best. After all of this, then the researcher then begins to review the literature around the title. So in this kind of situation, the researcher is already bottled up. And of course, they may not really get informed insights into whatever he wants to do. And this is not usually a recommended approach. In this kind of situation too, you get to see the researcher determining the kind of statistic analysis, after gathering data. When you have this kind of situation, you are likely to run into a lot of problems, and then the research outcomes of findings may not really be impactful as expected within the research community. But on the other side of the coin is what I call critical approach. We must have this at the back of our mind as researchers. That our approach must always be very critical. Of course, if you adopt administrative approach, it's not that you are not going to get something out of what you are doing, but it's going to be superficial. All right? It may not really be deep and address the issue thoroughly and meticulously. But when you adopt a critical approach, it's a situation where you actually conceptualize an idea within a research area. Okay, it can be within the area of econometrics, for instance. It can be within the area of health communication or development communication or social media and society. That's an area. Okay, you have not, as a matter of fact, determined any topic at this level, but you want to review literature across this. This is an area of interest to me. Then you now move to exploring literature, all right, across this area, so that I can actually get insights, okay, across the segment of the study in terms of the research objectives, of course, the hypothesis, theoretical framework, because in the preceding slide that I didn't show, I actually argue there that research is nothing but what we call conversation. It is a conversation, unlike Professor Arafiu, if I get the name right, from Unilag. Okay, so Professor Olufemi Shuaib said, you are not doing something entirely new. Somebody somewhere has actually attempted what you are trying to, re-engage. Therefore, it is a conversation. It is a global conversation. It is a regional conversation, of course, a national conversation. And that's why you get to see scholarly citation or references. People who have added their voices into this conversation. And when you get to review literature very well, you get to see voices of people who have added their voices to the conversation. So the critical approach is such that, having stated or having identified a particular research area, you now go into reviewing appropriate and relevant literature across all the areas. At that level, you begin to have tentative title. You have an idea into what are likely to be your research questions that you want to probe or investigate. Of course, hypothesis that you want to test as well. What theoretical framework is going to guide your work? Given the insight you have gathered from the literature, and of course, even your instruments. With two colleagues about 2-3 days ago, we went into literature. We are starting, we have just started a research, and we are connecting this particular research to the Ministry of Environment in Ogun State on waste disposal and management, and how we can actually use interpersonal communication and mass communication to improve the situation. So in our effort to actually adopt a critical approach, we got to see an instrument very close to what we are doing. So at that level, we have gotten a very good insight, a very good foundation to lay our efforts upon. So I always recommend a critical approach. And at that level, you also determine the kind of statistical analysis that you want to do. You'll have had an insight because you are very close to the literature. So when you do this, you achieve a lot. So this is one of the first advice I always recommend to especially younger researchers. In addition to this, I moved to another area that I call broad sections of research. It is important for every researcher to understand this aspect very well. There are two broad sections in any research: a journal article, a thesis, a dissertation, or a project. So the two aspects, the two sections are: number one, the conceptual section, and number two, the analytical section. The conceptual section covers in our own environment here, our chapters 1 to 3. In a journal article, for instance, it covers basically from your introduction to your theoretical framework, because at that level you are conceptualizing your study. Okay, you are looking into the problem, you are trying to find out what others have done in the past. So from which area, what gaps have you identified, and which area are you coming in? Then the second one is analytical section. That covers from your chapter 4 to chapter 5. At that level, you have gathered your data, you have done your analysis, you have gotten your findings or your results. You are now speaking to fact. You can now begin to make a claim. Of course, in this part of the world, I understand in Nigeria, we still do 1 to 5. In many parts of the country, you can do more than 5. For instance, I did 8 chapters in my thesis in New Zealand, where I studied my PhD. Explaining further, the broad section of research, conceptual and analytical. I have 2 illustrations here. We can see a doctor attending to a patient. You can also see a lawyer, making his claim in the law courts. So basically, I always advise researchers to assume the personality of a doctor at the conceptual level. Because at that level, you are asking a problem, you are looking for a problem, you are reviewing literature across what others have actually done into that problem. So from there, you get to see your tentative title, you get to see your research questions, objective hypothesis, and of course, what kind of methodology will be appropriate or relevant and suitable for this work. And of course, adoption or adaptation of research instruments. So at that level, you are not really making a lot of voices into the world because you have no basis to really do this. On the other side is the analytical aspect. At that level, you assume the personality of a lawyer. For a lawyer, you always speak to evidences in the law courts, because at that level, you have already done your data analysis, you have your findings, you are discussing your findings, and of course, you can make claims at that level. But what I get to see often is that you get to see people at the conceptual, part of the work making a lot of claims. I ask a question: on what basis are you making these claims? Okay. Of course, it is not that you can actually make an inference when you review literature. No one is saying that, but you must do that with some level of carefulness, giving attention to what should be given attention to, especially understanding the conceptual chapter, a section of the thesis or research article, and as well as the analytical aspect. So these are some of the things we need to bear in mind before you actually start your work. And then when you start your journey this way, you are likely to have a very fantastic experience in your research endeavor. So for now, on the housekeeping things, I think I would like to rest my case for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that wonderful introduction. I would like to go back to Professor Olufemi Saibu again this time around. Sir, we've moved past the housekeeping things, what we should have in mind as researchers when we are about to commence any academic research. Now, let us go into the core of it in terms of introduction, literature, method, and result. What are the things we should have in mind? Again, sir, I would like to remind that we would very much appreciate it if you can domesticate your responses to all of these things. In terms of coming up with introduction, I could glean that you are an economist from your first response. So in the area of social sciences and related areas, what are the things one should have in mind in terms of writing introduction? How do you source for literature? What method should you adopt? And what are the standards that one should look at for when you're trying to come up with a result and, of course, interpret result? You have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to appreciate the last speaker. He actually did a very good job with respect to the questions you are asking me now. And really, what he said, we are all together in the social sciences as well, and all he has said again applies to economics as well. Let me just add one or two things to it as well. So number one is that when we are doing introduction, which comprise everything in our chapter 1 as the conventional way we write, though that's also is changing now, so that we usually have the background to the study, the statement of problems, the issue of objectives, research questions, hypotheses, scopes, and so on and so forth for that aspect before we move on to the literature as well. In the background to the study as an economics as well, is that we're expecting somebody to present the real life problem. What are the issues? What are the issues that are actually generating discourse globally, internally, again, among government, among individuals as well? So, and that is the kind of things we expect you to have in your background, that's the real problem. Oh, Nigeria today is facing challenges with fuel subsidy. That today, as I'm speaking to you, many people cannot leave their houses because of at least no fuel. And yet, recently, now government just raised the price of fuel with the hope that that will ease the supply constraint as well. And so we really want to build that argument. And for me, I always want somebody to come from general perspectives. Maybe you start from discussing how the global oil market come down to Nigerian situation in terms of oil, despite that we are oil producing countries, we are net exporters, and so on and so forth. We have several companies that are producing oil in Nigeria. We produce quantities. We have refinery who are not working. We have government that has been regulating oil prices and so forth. So that we could start from the inverted pyramid, where you start from the general so big until narrow down to issues of maybe at least the fuel scarcity and cost. So in background to the study, we expect you to have something that, one, we present argument, and at that level, you must start from what is well known, what is not, maybe it's not in dispute. That's the first that's come. When people read your first sentence in your background to study, they must all agree, oh, that is true, and that's factual. So you don't start controversies from the beginning. You need to, first of all, buy in the confidence, the trust of people, and allow them to agree with you. Oh, that is true, and that is true. Oh, okay. You now begin to come up with areas where there could be at least divergency of opinion. But the first thing you must do in your background to the study at the early stage is to come up with things that are already agreed upon, are also is well known, there's no dispute about it as well, before you now begin to bring areas where there are divergences, and again, before you now begin to let people know which perspective you are looking at it. And like I said, for anything you are doing this case, You must have your mind. That's why you must have your research philosophy. How are you pushing it as well? Are you building value judgment? Do you want to build value judgment? You want to create a situation where people will be scared, you'll be afraid, or you just want to state your fact as a positive somebody, or you want to introduce a narrative interpretation? Oh, this is how the society is going. So, and that's why your research philosophy really play a lot of role the way you present your background to the study, because it is what is in you that will reflect what you bring out, so that what is out, people can see that and begin to see who you are and from which perspective you are presenting your argument. So I want that kind of approach as well to do that. So after you do that, when you now come to your statement of problem, or when you are stating your questions as well, you must definitely now come what you call at least information gap. That you want to, what are the information that's missing from your background that you think your research will definitely at least provide possible ways to solving them. I used to tell my team that your research work is not really to solve a problem, but to open the mind of people who want to solve problem to the way it can be solved. So you cannot say, oh, my work will solve poverty problem in Nigeria. It's not possible. Your research work cannot solve exterior problem in Nigeria. So in your research problem statement, you want to say, oh, these are the research gap, which is information gap. The information that is not available, the misconception that are existing, and the perspective that they are not looking at it as well. So after your background to the study, then when you come to research, you must come up with areas where you think they are getting it wrong as well, which you think by this, your studies, you'll be able to shed light into that areas and people could see. And it could be maybe what has been done elsewhere that you feel that maybe adopting similar way here could also provide a solution to it. Number three, it could be maybe the kind of approach they have adopted in the past as well. And it could also be in terms of maybe the kind of information they have been using as well. And so you must articulate that. And when you are articulating your statement of problem, one can see directly what is the likely question you are going to raise later, a research question. And again, one should be able to draw the kind of objective we are doing. And I as a student, some of my students, if you pick the background to the story of somebody, you should be able to identify, you be able to think where the kind of questions you will in, the kind of statement of problems you're going to write. And when you look at the statement of problem of somebody, without looking at the objective, you can pick your biro and then write out the kind of research question that that person will raise, and also the kind of objectives it's going to set out. And again, you should be able to have the likely approach that you may be likely to adopt in that as well. So in terms of a problem statement, like I mentioned, you must be able to identify what is information gap that you identified. What kind of information you think at least you are going to bring on board that will assist to change the scenario you painted in your background to the study. And coming to the objective, like we said now, everybody knows it must be smart. And again, in smart, being smart is that your objective should not be bigger than your title of your work. And you must ensure that in your objectives must be, at times, I always want an objective that is systematic. Objective 1 should be able to build into objective 2. Objective 2 should be able to build into objective 3. Objective 3 should be able to objective 4 to the last essence, because they are one in many. So all of them are thematic area of the same broad topical area you are looking at. So even when each of them can stand alone in terms of paper writing, but when you put them together, there must be a flow of ideas from objective 1 to the last objective as well. But a situation whereby your objective 1 stands alone and has no link even with the title of your work, and objective again has no link with objective 1 as well. So it doesn't show a kind of logical presentation of argument. The same thing even applies to even the background to the study, also applies to the same problem, and also the same thing must go to research questions and research objectives, whereby people can draw at least what you are trying to do, and that shows a flow from beginning. Your background to the study provide the real life in situations, real life problem, and from that you identify the problem. You now come to your problem statement. You identify the information gap that create the scenario that you observe your background to study. Coming to your research questions, You now summarize your statement of problem into questions, and then you now turn that questions to objectives. And that is the flow of ideas and then the interconnections between all those sections. And your scope must be well defined as well. So you cannot examine everything and you cannot do all, but you must demarcate your work. What are the areas, what are specific issues you want to examine? And that must be clearly stated as an economist as well. If you are studying, maybe you want to study Nigeria now, maybe for instance, the currency devaluations in Nigeria and maybe economic performance or currency devaluations and poverty incidence in Nigeria as well. So if you say in Nigeria, number one, if you definitely you may go time series and you must state, okay, from which period or use period are you looking at as well? You must state that period clearly, but you must justify it. Justify it in terms of what happens during that period. For instance, I'm looking at exchange rate devaluations and poverty in Nigeria now. I can start from something like 1980, 85, 86, because that was the period we changed from the fixed exchange rate regime to a little market driven as well, and justify that argument. I can also start from 1960 to date to argue that I want to see before and after as well. But you must provide a strong justification. It is not enough for you to argue that because you want to have enough data points and economists. No, you must explain that because of several policies that were undertaken that period that could have explained the challenges we are facing during the period again. You must even argue in terms of maybe some intervention we have received from international agencies that have asked us to adopt certain policies, directives as well. And again, you also can argue in terms of what that internal dynamism that have taken place, in terms of maybe increasing number of banking system we have in Nigeria, introduction of different monetary policies as well that we have as well. So those one could serve as a basis, and you now argue that you are not going beyond that scope as well, and that is exactly what constitutes your scope. And also, if you are using some terminologies that are taking different meaning from what we all know, you must create optional definition of terms. That optional definition of terms is the way you use a word that are already being used in a different way in literary communication. That in this your work, GDP means, in fact, it means economic growth, for instance. It could mean output. It could mean productivity. So when you say poverty here, maybe it means lack of income. It could be lack of expenditure. So you must define it. And once you provide the way you define in your work, anybody that want to argue with you will only tell you, oh, at least that is a way you argue as well. And that's the way you define it. So in your subsequent analysis, you must have that in your mind, that is the way you define, and you cannot be carried away by the way others define it, because you have already defined the way you want to use the word in your work. Somebody can use poverty to measure prosperity because it's the opposite of prosperity, that's poverty. So you can say, okay, you are measuring well-being in these studies by poverty. So it means wherever you talk about negative poverty, it means better well-being as well. So you can create a operational definition of terms in that respect. So when you come to your literature review, I also want people to have also, again, what I said, their own mindset. How am I organizing my literature review? You can go by a chronological approach. You can go by a thematic approach. That is, and the best is to combine the two together. So you collect your relevant literature across at least discipline, across area. And then you now say, okay, which one comes first? Which study?
I believe Professor Saibu is having network issue at the moment. I want to recommend that we just wait in for 2 minutes to see if he can reconnect. If he's not able to join us in 2 minutes, we'll go back to Dr. Semiu Bello. Dr. Semiu Bello, sir, I would like you to impress further from where you stopped in your introductory statement. What are the things we should have in mind as far as content is concerned? Have the floor, sir.
All right, thank you very much. our anchor person. I sincerely once again thank the organizer for this opportunity. Like I have said, research is a conversation, and of course, it's a science, and we need to follow a set of procedures. In terms of the context, of course, Professor Olufemi has actually said a lot. He has been able to speak to specifics, but I think it is important for me to actually emphasize some rudiments here in a scholarly research, like we have, we have said. So I'd like to start from the importance of the literature review. All right. Most of the activities that we do as far as research is concerned is actually based on literature review. But this is where we actually get the insight, where everything appears to stem from. And from there you can now take over. And that is why most of scholars have said that literature review is actually the most critical aspect of a scholarly research. Because through a good literature review, we get a lot of it is like a map, okay, through which you see the entire territory of what you are doing. And that is why if you engage literature very well, you are likely to map up the territory in an excellent way. Because from your literature review, you get to see the past, you get to see the gap, and of course, you set the boundary. So let me take it from the introduction. In your introduction, as a researcher, you should know that this is where you define the problem. This is where you engage the problem. This is where you spotlight the problem. So that when your reader reads what your introduction looks like, he knows that you are on top of the game. But if you fail to engage literature review properly and critically, your introduction will just be one of those traditional introductions. And that is why, as a researcher, you are not doing something entirely new, but you are adding values, okay, to what others have done. And that is what it's called research, doing it again and again, or doing it anew. So if you don't actually undertake or engage or explore the literature properly, your introduction would be very deficient. At that level, you are defining the problem, you are engaging the problem, and you are providing perspectives. Because like I've said in my earlier presentation, it is a conversation. You are not the one that is starting that conversation. And the conversation is not entirely original to you. Other scholars have actually added their voice. Okay, there could be people who actually originally started that conversation. I often cite the case of agenda setting theory in media and communication scholarship. For instance, the popular idea of agenda setting theory actually came on board in 1972. But if you go deeper into the literature, you discover that the early thesis on agenda setting theory started in 1922, then 1963, 1966, and of course 1972, when it was officially debuted into the literature, or officially recognized or commissioned by Malcolm and Shaw in 1972. But that's an example of a kind of a conversation. But if you don't undertake literature review properly, you will not be able to get all of this. Like I've said as well, when you move away from your introduction, is like you are driving towards the critical aspect of your work. And that is why your introduction is a kind of signpost. Okay, at that level, if I read an introduction of your work, I know what I'm likely to get in that work or in that thesis, because you'll have undertaken the issues critically. You will have given perspectives, historical perspective. I will have seen the narratives and the development of the issue you are engaging, and of course, I will have seen so many implications you are trying to find out, and of course, the gap, which is going to define the voice you are going to add to that conversation. So we need to understand this. And of course, moving away from that, I also like to emphasize at this time, the essence of doing or engaging the literature and how we should do it better. It's a critical aspect of, any academic research or writing. So the first thing I always recommend is that when you are doing your literature, you must do what we call critical evaluation to know the state of affairs. It's not that you are just quoting people, you are just downloading what they have said, you are just creating a kind of volume into your work. No, you must engage in what we call critical evaluation to determine the state of affairs. And of course, when you are doing that, you are not expected to plagiarize. I'm sorry, we need to be very careful in this regard. Okay, and that's why I actually advise that at the beginning of our work, we should assume the status or the personality of a doctor who is looking for a problem. At that level, you are looking for a problem. You are not making any claim, because if you begin to make a claim, you might end up, plagiarizing somebody's work. All right, because you'll be hiding your voice without a basis. So what you need to do after critical evaluation of the literature, scholarly works previously done related to what you are doing is to paraphrase now. Okay, the hallmark of a good and a seasoned researcher is paraphrasing skill. This is a skill we must develop. All right, it's a way of pruning down, it's a way of summarizing, and it's a way of doing it in your own words, doing it in your own expression, and of course, you must also give credit to the original source. So you must develop this. This is quite important when you are developing your research. And of course, in paraphrasing, after you must have gone through a lot of literature, a lot of scholarly works, in the hundreds, I say. So you now need to synthesize and present logically. Synthesization and logical presentation is important. You don't cite 2000 before 1940. You don't cite 2005 before 2000. That does not show logical presentation. And the ability to synthesize all that you have reviewed is important, so that there could be flow, there could be coherence, there could be sequence of thoughts, so that you are the one piloting your reader, your examiner. Let your examiner read your work and smile. Let your reader read your work and appreciate scholarship. If you undertake your literature review very well and you apply all these important points, you are good to go. And of course, while you are doing that, you should be able to compare and contrast as well. This is important, because you must see what Scholar A has done, and of course, compare it with what Scholar B has also done. Then what is the point of convergence? Perhaps you could get why there's divergence in this and there's convergence in this in the analysis. And you're able to speak to that maybe when you're also doing your own connection that we call discussion of findings. And of course, it is not that you can't actually add your voice, but do that in a very little way and be very careful about that. When you're adding your voice, you make an inference, a logical inference, you now add your voice, but you are not making any claim at that level. Otherwise, you will be running into a problem, because it creates a lot of issues, especially when you get to see a critical examiner. All right, so literature review, I always emphasize, sits in the center of big debate when we are talking of any scholarly work or any research work. It's a researcher must master the skill of literature review and be able to apply some of these points when you are engaging the literature. Another area of importance here is try as much as possible to underpin the variables, okay? The variables in your research. I emphasize the variables in your research. And how do I mean? In your introduction, in your chapter 1, in the introductory part of your research paper, this is what we need to see. In what way have you been able to engage the variables? Okay, starting from the independent variables, the dependent variables, do you have any moderating or intervening variables? These are the things that we like to see in your background. And there must also be a strong connection in between all these variables or among these variables. And that is why, as an examiner, each time I take a thesis, I like to see your variables and how you have related well, with your variables. And of course, when you are doing it, anytime you want to do your literature review, your variables should guide your thoughts. Your variables should guide your search. I look at the variables in your title, your tentative title, or your final title, then I go into your background. I could see the way you engage them individually and how you also eventually creates the connection. This is very important. Just recently, I was engaging a master's student, and I was asking her that could you please point out and discuss the variables in your work. It was a serious matter. So if you don't understand, the variables in your work in the first instance, how then do you engage the variables effectively, and how then do you anchor your thesis objectively? So these are serious issues, and I'm appealing to particularly early research scholars to give attention to this. I also like to, at this point in time, of course, the Professor Olufemi has said a lot, in terms of your research objectives and other things. But let me at this point also emphasize the issue of instrumentalization or instrumentation in our research. You see, I create a scenario here. I said, remember that if a doctor collects wrong information, if you do a wrong diagnosis, you remember you are a doctor at the beginning of your work, and you are meant to collect information, you are meant to gather information because you are looking at the problem. All right? But if the doctor gets correct information, that is good instrument or good instrumentation, the prescriptions, okay, is going to describe the right drugs, that is right statistical analysis. And the patients will appreciate the doctor, that is scientific evidence in the outcome of your work. All right? So instrumentation is important. I cited the example of myself and two co-authors or researchers who have just started a research. We are looking at the waste disposal and management in Ogun State, and how we can actually deploy the efficacy of interpersonal communication and mass communication in changing the orientation of Ogun State citizens. So we started reviewing literature, we came across instruments. At that level, we have projected what we are likely to get through the instruments. But if you don't factor in the design, the proper design of your instruments into, of course, into your research from the beginning, you are likely to run into a serious problem. So all of this is, and that is why when you are finishing your conceptual chapter, you must also fine-tune the research instruments. At that level, you are completing the job of being a doctor, and you want to move to the level of becoming a lawyer. So you must get it right. So at this stage, I think it's important for us to understand all of these constructs while we go into the body of our research. So I want to say a very big thank you again to our anchor person.
Thank you very much, sir, for that thought on what we should put our attention to as far as the content is concerned. We're glad to have Professor Adewuyi join us now. Welcome on board, sir. Again, distinguished guests and gentlemen, please, if you're just joining us, kindly state your name, your designation, and where you're joining us from using the chat box. Professor Adewuyi, sir, we've been talking about, before you joined, we've talked about the introduction, the housekeeping activities, what research should have in mind before we embark on any academic research, particularly as it relates to different fields. I understand, sir, you're a professor of chemistry or related areas. So we would like to have your thoughts from what we've discussed before now. One, on housekeeping activities. As a researcher in the field of science, what are the housekeeping activities we should have in mind, or what we should put forward in terms of preparation? Then we'd also like that you move forward to where we are right now in terms of introduction, literature review, and the approach to it, how to conduct research, method, and of course, every other standard procedure that involves or that revolves around conducting academic research as far as science is concerned. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Sincerely speaking, I'm highly elated to be part of this discussion because it is a very, very important area that is highly significant for any development. Without wasting our time, the first thing first, like you have said, the housekeeping activity. I will first mention that why bother with research in the first instance? And to answer that, I will simply say it is an important and a relevant question that all students need to ask themselves before committing to a research project. You must ask, why do I want to bother myself with this effort about to be carried out? And of course, like you have rightly mentioned, we are from the science field. And of course, we all say that science does not happen overnight. All the results that we have seen so far as a result of science and technology are indeed product of research activities that people have committed themselves into. So getting involved with a science project is first and foremost time-consuming. We must first underline that an individual must not just think that, let me just quickly and rush into this research work and expecting to get a result. No, it's not done that way. So you must first note that it is time-consuming. And of course, it begins by you, I put it, hitting the books. You must learn about a given topic. You must learn about the past research in the field that you are planning to go into. You must just be ready to read both the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary sources where you can get information from. So a researcher cannot afford to be lazy in terms of reading. And of course, talking about reading, talking of relevant areas that is related to the field in which you are having the mind to carry your research on. Of course, you must plan, you must design, you must build, and of course, you must perform a series of experiments to take data. All these must form the background, must be somewhere at the back of your mind that I must plan myself, I must plan my time, I must design effectively. If you have poor design, you are tantamount to getting poor results. Of course, you must build and perform a series of experiments. You are going to know these experiments to be performed as an outcome of what you have read from the related books, related journals that you have read ab initio. And of course, you are going to do a strong and sophisticated analysis to make appropriate conclusions. And of course, at the end of the day, you must have in mind that you have to write a clear and detailed report to present to the outside world for review and assessment. I'm going to talk more about this aspect as we go along, but let me mention that any research carried out and you do not give the detailed report of it, just known to you only, is just the same as you have done nothing. And I want us to emphasize and underline that. So the truth is, no matter what the project or the scientific discipline studied, every single researcher who does a project will learn a tremendous amount, most especially in the field of science. And as a result, at the background, the researcher will learn that science really takes time. And of course, the individual researcher or group, they must, one, be meticulous. Number two, they must be competent. Number three, they must be clever. Number four, they must be creative. Number five, they must be motivated. And I want us to underline that aspect. the aspect of motivation, that is lacking in this part of the world. Researchers in this part of the world are not really motivated. If you ask majority of us in the academia, why do you carry out your research? You know, why do you publish? The answer they are likely to give you is because I want to earn promotion in this part of the world, which is far beyond that, you know. If time permits, I'm going to dwell more on that. And of course, the last one is that they must be fascinated with the way, you know, nature works around them. In other words, they must be very, very observant. And as a result, engaging in research will lead to knowledge acquisition. And we say knowledge is power. So when we gain much practical knowledge by engaging in a research, the researcher will not only learn about specific topics, the researcher will learn much about themselves in the course of carrying out the research. So I conclude by saying it is worth the time, it is worth the effort to be engaged in a meaningful research work. So what are the things that we must consider when developing a research plan as part of the housekeeping? And I have a brief description, which I'm going to quickly mention because of time. The first, there must be a brief descriptive title of the proposed research, which is a direct statement of your research goal, okay? There must be a reason for your research. I've said that, you must identify it. Why is it important to find an answer to the question that you are raising or you are going to raise? You must find answer to this under the research plan. And of course, there must be a background information on your topic. And that is where the area of literature work comes in, which I'm going to talk more. So this will provide a summary of information you have found concerning the topic you want to actually research. You know, you must think of things like the research that was already been done in the field. The questions remaining from any prior research must be identified, and a brief highlight of any theory or theories that may exist to explain the phenomenon must also be noted during the course of the planning of your research. Of course, in the course of the planning, you must propose experiment or simulation, as the case may be. You must know what design your research will have. You must know what controls must be in place. And you must know how you will measure relevant quantities in the course of your planning of your research. What are some probable problems or uncertainties that you expect to deal with? All these you must take note in the course of the planning of your research. What expected levels of precision will your measurements and therefore your results have in the course of your research? And very, very important aspect during the course of your planning is the timetable you must set for yourself. What are your initial projections and expectations as far as the time needed to carry out the experiment or data collection and analysis? You know, the initial projections and expectations as far as the time that will be needed to do all this must also be well planned. And of course, any other concern for the research, like, are you going to involve in live specimen? especially the vertebrates, if they are involved? Have you taken care of the laws that guide the use of such specimens? You know, have you also taken care of any possible dangers when it comes to the use of chemicals, like in our area? Have you noted that some of the chemicals you are going to be engaging in, you have noted the risk of explosions, you have noted that all gases will be produced, you have noted the case where there could be fire. In fact, let me relate an experience in this particular area. I remember when I was doing my PhD some years back, I didn't actually take note of this aspect. Everybody in science will know that we must not leave sodium metal naked. And I was working with sodium. If you leave it naked, it reacts gradually with everything, and it can quickly catch fire. And I was introducing sodium in my reactive medium. I didn't put into consideration this I have mentioned. And what I noticed immediately was fire. And you could imagine somebody having an experience you have not prepared for. So immediately my reactions caught fire. I ran out of the lab. And why that? Because I didn't take note of this in my initial plan. And that is why it is very important to take note of dangers must be noted and must be part of the plan at the beginning of the research. I hope you can still hear me there. Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. And quickly, let me conclude this before I go to where we are under introduction. Of course, after compiling and analyzing your data, you have reached a logical conclusions, and of course, you write up a research report. Under this, there are so many considerations and details that one must think about and to do that is going to enhance the research. So one will be busy with, classes, with disciplines, and of course with good time management. And as a result of this, if all I have said earlier on are well planned, there wouldn't be any reasons for one to be complaining of, I do not get good result at the end of the day. So, like I said, good planning obviously will lead to good results. Why bad planning will obviously result into bad results. So these are the additional things I would like to add when it comes to housekeeping. Now, going back to the content and the rudiments, of course, the last speaker have spoken very well with regards to the introduction and the literature review. Very, very important. And let me just quickly add one or two things, because all is said are also related to what we do in sciences. But let me add that a literature review is a critical survey of recent, relevant research in a particular field. I want everybody there to note, it is not a research if we found out that what you are doing is a mere repetition of what people have done. In fact, I tell my students, you have merely wasted your time, you have wasted resources. Because if you do not carry out effective literature review, there is a possibility of you repeating what others have done. That you carry a literature review, as the last speaker mentioned, the essence, really, the purpose is to offer the reader an overview of the current state of the research. you are going to have an idea what is the current state. And that is why, like the last speaker mentioned, you want to do a literature review, and all you are doing is to be reading the papers published in the 80s, in the 90s, even in the 20s. You are merely wasting your time because you are not reading current and relevant materials to that your field. And that is why depending on institutions, like our own institution, if you are going to do a literature review and you are going to write your report, we want to see journal articles that is maximum 5 years, counting from that year which you are reporting your work. I know some do allow 10 years. This is 2024, for instance. If you are going to do your literature review and you cannot review literatures in 2023, 2022, 2021, 2020, and by maximum 2019, we say you are wasting your time because you are not going to be flowing with the current thing. And we have said you want to be familiar with the current state of research. So that is number one. Number two, it will allow you to situate your paper within that field of research, which is very, very important. The essence, you must identify the gap. And by doing an effective literature review, it's going to assist you to identify the research gap. Yes, we will claim that nothing is new that we are doing, but I tell you, something is new when you develop or you improve upon what people have done. There is no way a researcher will be able to cover everything because life itself is dynamics. What you have found today as working, by tomorrow, there could be another factor that may render what you have found not to be working. And if you do not find out what that researcher has said yesterday, that this will work, and you now come in today, you now find out that, oh, because of this factor, what that researcher A said might not work, then it's going to be difficult for you to make a progress. So very, very critical. So your review, I want us to note to answer key questions about the literature. And I'm going to mention those literatures. I hope I'm still audible then.
Yes, you are, sir.
Okay, good. So let me just quickly mention those questions that your literature review must answer. Number one, what is the current state of knowledge on the topic? Your literature review must answer that question. If you cannot find answer to that question in whatever review you have done, then you have not done a good literature review. Number two, what differences in approaches or methodologies are there? What differences in approaches / methodologies are there? If your literature review again cannot point out these differences in that particular topic which you want to carry out research on, then your literature review is not a very good one. Number three, where are the strengths and weaknesses of the research? Where are the strengths and weaknesses of the research? If your literature review cannot identify the strengths and weaknesses of that research field, then you have not done effective literature review. Then finally, your literature review must answer the question, what further research is needed? What further research is needed? And this is what will actually now allow you to go into that field, having identified what further research is needed. This plus what the former speakers have said are things that are very germane when it comes to the area of content the area of literature review in research. And let me just stop here for now, should in case there are other additions and other questions for me to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. That was very robust thoughts on the topic. To Professor Saibu, while you were giving your response to the second question, we lost you on the call, but thankfully you're back now. So I want you to please land your thoughts about what we should know regarding content which involve introduction, literature review, method and results, and of course conclude, because we want to start entertaining questions from audience as from 12:10. So please kindly conclude on your thoughts that you were given before network kicked you out of the call. And of course, please let us have a conclusion and general overview of whatever it is you want our audience to know. Thank you. We have the floor, sir.
So I appreciate Dr. Semiu Bello. It was like as if she took over from my brain when he was speaking. So, and that's why I did not raise my hand up again to conclude. So what he said about literature review is exactly what I would have said as well. And that's exactly the point I was trying to make, that you cannot cite a paper in 1980 after you cited a paper in 2020 as well. And I said there are two approaches. Either you go through thematic in terms of the theme, and a go through chronological order in terms of the date of publication. But what I always suggest is a blend of the two. That since you have identified your research questions, your objective, you must organize your literature review thematically in line with your objectives. And in section 1 should also, after your general conceptual definition of concept, when you come to theoretical and empirical review, you must ensure that they follow your theme as decided from your problem statement, which also go into your research questions and research objectives as well. So when you come to literature review, you also follow that approach. And then ensure that each of the paper you are reviewing must lay background for the next one. And like I used to encourage that students to follow a MEAL approach, MEAL, is the main argument, and then the evidence, then the application, and then linkage. So when you pick a particular paper, what is the main argument of that paper? How does that argument, that paper now apply, and the evidence is provided to support that argument? How does he explain it? How does he analyze it as well? Then after that, that analysis, which should be from you as well, must provide at least a link to the next paper you are going to review, so that from your paper 1 to the last paper, there must be a flow along them. So the last paper should identify even your core gaps you are analyzing. So you should use paper B to fill the gap that A did not fill, paper C to fill the gap that B did not fill, until you get to the last one, the Z one, which there's no paper to do, which your own is now going to fill. So that systematic approach allows people to see the flow of thought, and then the wideness of your work, and then the depth of your discussion about that as well. So you must be able to do, and that means you must be organized, you must be intentional, you must be purposeful before you even start reviewing. So you definitely have to have read this thing extensively. You must be able to get all available information that are available regarding your work, and be able to now already get them in your database and begin now to tick them. This one comes first, followed by this. So you don't review as you see the paper. No. In fact, if you get some latest paper that you know can distort your flow of thought, you can ignore it as well, or you can restructure it if it will not delay you so much. But there must be evidence of a systematic approach in your review. And after you have done that, it's very interesting as well. When you read somebody's literature review and you get to their methodology, you cannot see a link between their theoretical framework and any of the theory review. So it's among the theory you review that you identify the one that's very strong, support your argument. And since you are the one setting the question, answering it, you must already prepare that theory you want to use for theory framework to be very, very strong and explain in detail. So people will be able to see the likely theory you may use at theory framework from reviewing your literature review. And when you are now generating your empirical model as well, or other analytical things as well, once you be able to see from that which of the methodological approach you review that are likely to be the one, because you will have criticized existing one, and you identify the one that have greater strength. And then when you get to that place, it's very easy for people to link your methodology with your literature review. Having done that, when you come to your data analysis, there are issues there in social science as well. Some people will like you to, first of all, present your data, and then you do your discussion. For me, from economics perspective, at times this always creates problem. In sciences, it's possible for you now to see your experiments, your result, and go. You now devote the time. There is nothing that says you cannot simultaneously present your result and discuss immediately, and then be able to, that allow things to flow. But for me to first of all see your data, you just explain this and code. You now come to the section, you now say you are discussing, and you now begin to look back and forth for the table as well. At times, you also distract the reviewers and co. So for me, how we encourage even some of our colleagues who are supervisors again to be able to allow that flexibility, or people allowing discussion to go simultaneously with presentation of results as well, because it creates a lot of distortions as well. The other thing I also want to suggest is that, which is not becoming popular as well, and that's what I'm used to in South Africa, where I hardly have a very good time with them as well, is that our empirical presentation of results should follow our objectives. Then if you have 5 sections, apart from the preliminaries, that will be section A. Section B should link to objective 1, objective like that. And in that one, you can have your empirical results to follow your objective directly. So it's not that maybe you just give me a table and again you now say that's your result. No, I want to see a full discussion of your objective in line with your methodology you have in your 3 or so, and get to the last section. And finally, there are other approaches that I used to encourage, especially when it comes to thesis, and is that one, we allow each chapter to stand on its own and to have every part of it, introduction, objectives, and methodology, and that way to the end, such that that when you say your chapter 1 could stand alone, but at least link to the other chapter as well. And that's about the thesis I would like to discuss. When you come to paper writing, what I always encourage a library to do is that you don't start writing paper from writing introductions and co. The starting point for a paper is for you to do literature review, identify what is in existence, and based on that, identify the issues you want to analyze. Go straight from that to your methodology, you decide, go collect your data, do every other thing. When you have gotten your results, you've done the analysis, you now go back and write the full paper from beginning, because once you follow that approach, you won't have problem with your articulation of your set of problem background, because you already got the data, so you won't get stuck that, oh, I have started my paper and I got to the middle, I cannot get data and go or the methodology. So the starting point for paper writing should be the middle. That means methodology. And from methodology with your literature review combined together, you'll be able to identify the gaps in the literature, look at the method you want to use that have not been used that you think you should use, then do that, use the method, get the data, analyze it, explain, conclude, and you now go back from that from beginning. If you follow that approach, is moving from answer to the question, and in that way you cannot miss any of them. But the usual conventional method, and you write the introduction, you write the literature review, you go to the methodology, and when you get to the methodology, now you discover that this data is not available, or oh, this is not this again, and you have problem of going further back. But if you start from that level, then automatically you will be able to conclude from beginning. So finally, what I am suggesting is that we must be prepared. We must be ready before we do thesis, before we do paper publications as well. Number 2 is that we must have in our mind that we want to contribute to 3 things. We want to contribute to knowledge, we want to contribute to policy, we want to contribute to practice as well. And we must ask ourselves, in what ways is this effort contributing to this aspect as well? Number 3 is that we must situate our work in the context of at least our discipline. And what people should be able to read your work and be able to say, oh, this person is an economist, this is a mass communicator, this is a psychologist. A situation whereby an economist will write a paper on entrepreneurship, you will not be able to distinguish the paper from somebody who is speaking from maybe a business management. So in terms of the way you approach your work, your philosophy, your method,
that will really give explanation of those results that you have gotten. And of course, on reflection, was your research method appropriate? Because at times, the deviation you see could be as a result of inappropriateness of your research method. And finally, can you account for any differences between your results and other studies? Can you account for any differences between your results and other studies? And I'm very, very sure if you are able, to identify and make use of all these checklists, obviously, is going to assist you in writing your results and your discussion. I'm sure it's going to assist greatly. Let me also quickly mention under instrumentation, like I said, in sciences, we work more with instruments, most especially in chemistry. I have said it's very important for you to detail the procedure. Of course, outline the instrument which you have considered to use in your particular research. Now, if the instruments have previously been used, you must identify previous studies and findings related, the reliability and the validity of the instrument. Let me give a specific example for the purpose of those that are in core science, more especially those in chemistry. AAS, atomic absorption spectrophotometer, is an instrument that we use to quantify metals, most especially the toxic metals in our environment, the like of lead, the like of cadmium in our environment. However, because of the ever-improving technology, we have a better instruments, that is more reliable, and in terms of validity is so better than AS, and that is ICP-OES. So you must be able, as a good researcher, know which instrument to apply for what. And that is why at times you see some of the work that we do in this part of the world, when it is reported and you plan to publish it outside the country, first of all, what the editor will check is to look at what are the type of instruments that you use. If they are the ones that are not reliable and that's valid, the editor will not even bother to send your paper to reviewer. Right in from the editor, it will just tell you there is nothing they want to do with your submission, and it will be rejected because of you do not apply the appropriate instruments. Again, finally, I want to talk about data analysis under our result and discussion. For some of us that we do engage in data analysis, it is very important to specify the procedure that is used, and we label appropriately and accurately. I take, for instance, if you have used ANOVA, if you have used Mankova, if you have used HLM, if you have used grounded theory, all these must be well labeled. If coding procedures are used, you must describe in reasonable detail. If you have used the triangulated one, you must carefully explain how you went about it. You must communicate your precise intention and reasons for these intentions to the reader. And this is going to help you and the reader to evaluate the choices you made and procedures you followed. All these are very essential tips when it comes to result and discussion in our research. Let me just stop here for now to accommodate questions and clarifications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Let us quickly move to the concluding remarks now so that we can have questions. I would like to start with Dr. Semiu Bello. Please let us have your concluding remarks regarding what you've been saying since we began this presentation, what you think researchers should go home with, and every other thing you might want to add as a final thought. You have the floor, sir.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Tawhid, for coming on board again. And of course, quickly to the business, I'm not to repeat what others have said, particularly on the, reporting the findings and other things. But I think it is important just to emphasize one or two points, especially in the area of the findings. One is that especially in our own area, social sciences, and of course, the media and communication scholarship in particular, I like to emphasize that while reporting our findings, we should actually focus on the interpretative aspect of the findings. We should not actually do what we call table reading. And when you actually report what is actually contained in the table or in the figure, no, that is not desirable. You must actually interpret the findings. In other words, bring out the hidden treasure behind all the figures you have in the table. So I want to emphasize that. Then number two, I also want to emphasize that we should not sound too assertive and authoritative in our findings while reporting. This is quite essential because, like Professor Adewuyi said, your time changes, and whatever you hold today has been true, may be challenged tomorrow. So you don't sound too assertive and authoritative in your findings, and that's where you must be modest by using appropriate rhetorics. This is important. Then, of course, we should be mindful of the applicable tense that we need to use. Past tense, of course, in reporting our findings. So I need to emphasize all these essential points. Another aspect in the concluding part I like to emphasize is referencing as well as a citation. What actually differentiates scholarly research or academic research from all other writings undertaking that people, is actually referencing citation. And we must do this and do it, in the best way. So why do we need to actually, be so conscious and conscientious about referencing? Number one, referencing is actually meant to distinguish or differentiate ideas. Of course, it is allowed as a researcher that you also lend your voice into the conversation, but then you should be able to differentiate your own voice and the voices of others who have conducted, who have engaged that particular subject matter. So, citation or references actually bring about the differentiation between your own voice and the voices of other scholars. And number two, when you do proper referencing or citation, you demonstrate range and of course quality. When scholarly works or researches are judged, are scaled, are elevated, okay, by virtue of scholarly citations, outcurrents. As a researcher in health communication, for instance, for anybody who's undertaking a research in health communication, I like to see some voices. And if I could get to see those voices, I know you are communicating, you have actually undertaken a serious job. Then number three here, the essence of referencing is to give direction to readers, and of course to avoid plagiarism, and of course to achieve academic integrity. So what the hallmark of a researcher, a contemporary and a seasoned researcher, is to attain academic integrity. And the only way to achieve that is through proper referencing and citation. Then what do we cite? Like we have noted earlier on, we cite, we reference opinions, theories, statements that are academic in nature, claims, statistics, graphs, and of course, population figure and financials. These are some of the things that are citable in a scholarly engagement. Of course, we should be familiar with what's referencing formats that is or that are applicable in our field, generally in social sciences, we do use APA references format. You should be able to, we must be familiar with this. You should be able to differentiate between, narrative citation and parenthetical citation. And when do we apply each of them? All of these are quite essential that we need to understand. In addition to this is the ethical part of our research. I always emphasize that we must be ethical researchers. And this is, another important aspect of our job. All right. I mentioned the issue of academic integrity. One of the ways to also achieve it is by being ethical in our research. When you are an ethical researcher, you avoid plagiarism of any kind. Then you understand and you relate well with authorship distribution in a collaborative research. We get to see people who really don't understand how to distribute authorship in research. For instance, the fact that somebody supervises a research project, say a PhD project, a master's project, or whatever project does not qualify you to be the first author. Because this is not a fresh research undertaking that you all come on board as collaborators, where you conceive the idea, you lead others, then you are going to naturally be the first author. But in a research project where you actually supervise, okay, your supervisor remains the first author, except when after the old work, there are lots of modifications, there are lots of adjustments which cannot be undertaken by your student. They have to take it upon yourself. At that level, there are issues, but we should be able to know this. And we should also avoid the culture of please include me. If you do this, we'll be killing and be doing the service to research industry. So we should understand this as part of ethical consideration. Of course, we should be able to define clear assignment or task in a collaborative research. At the conceptual level of any research, when you are conceiving the idea, you should be, okay, you do your outline. Okay, you take the first two, or when you realize your strength in this outline, you must distribute tasks. And at that level, you also decide criteria for determining who is the first author, the second author, and all of that. You also must understand the dimension of posthumous authorship. In other words, you have started a work with an author, and as God would have it, he dies in the process. But you have completed the work only for you to send it out. You must know the ethical guidelines in posthumous authorship. So if originally the person is actually meant to be the first author, so be it, even after his demise. So you have to be the second author. All right. Or sometimes you can discuss with his estate or the family of the person that you all agree on how to go about it. But you must not, on the basis of the fact that the person is dead, that you now begin to change authorship. This is not really acceptable. You also must understand what constitutes conflict of interest in your research, so that you are not working against yourself, against your organization, and of course, your personal integrity. Finally, in this is do not patronize multiple outlets, simultaneously with a single work. Okay, because I want my article or my manuscript to get published on time, then I throw it into so many or multiple outlets. This is not desired. This is not actually allowed. Okay, you must deal with an outlet at a time. If you are rejected, you can revoke your paper, then send to another place. But it's not ethical for you to deal with multiple outlets simultaneously with a single paper. Then the last part here is mastering the principle of academic writing. Academic writing has its own principles, has its own culture that a seasoned researcher must understand and undertake them. And this is what makes it different from any other forms of writing. So one of the principles is write short sentences. The shorter, the better. Write short sentences, the shorter, the better. Number two, know when to use active voice and passive voice. And of course, in most cases, we desire the usage of active voice. So but you must master when to use active voice and passive voice. Be clear in the sense of clarity. Avoid blind spots. I always emphasize this, what I call blind spots in our writing. Anytime you are writing and you begin to doubt, it appears there is darkness in that sentence, in that construction, in that expression, please review it. Go through it over and over again and again. That is your blind spots until you get clarity before you move on. Otherwise, you know, somebody else can actually get onto that, and that may not be too good. Then number 3 here is avoid what we call conversationalism. You know, academic research is a formal engagement, and as such, you know, we do not, it is not usually encouraged or allowed to be using conversational language, informal languages. It's an academic and a serious, so we have to treat it as, you know, academic of a formal engagement. Use good and acceptable grammar. This is important. And that is why sometimes after the whole effort you invested in your thesis as a PhD scholar or in your writing, there's nothing bad to get editorial assistance from somebody who's an expert. Because these can actually work against, it has actually worked against so many people. The injection of good grammar, good English into our thesis, our academic engagements is important. It elevates the status of our thesis, and we must ensure that we do all of this. The proper formatting is essential. You can have the best word in this, the best work in this world, but if you don't format properly, it can also give a minus to your work. Then write academically because it is a scholarly communication and not an imaginary, fictitious, or journalism communication. Write academically because what you are doing is nothing but an academic endeavor, which has its own language and culture, and we must actually follow that path. Then for me to round up finally here, I have some takeaways for our participants. Number 1, we must know that research is an academic conversation and a scholarly communication. And that is why it has its own specific audience, language and culture, and of course the medium as well, or media we want to say this time around. Then number 2, that its undertaking is either to specifically contribute to knowledge or solve a societal problem. As a researcher, you must know it is either I'm actually doing or conducting this research to contribute to a pool of knowledge or to solve a particular problem. Number 3, that a research is a unique phenomenon with a universal lens and global rudiments. I mean, you see, the presentation of those of us who are presenting here today, we see a lot of convergence in our presentation because it's a global thing. You know, it has to be taken as a global enterprise. Then number 4, that the hallmark of a scholarly research is exhaustive, intensive, and rigorous literature review. It is the center of the debate where you get virtually every insight into your work, and as such, you must ensure that you undertake your literature review very seriously. Number 5, that a scholarly research is not an opinion article, and as such, proper referencing and citation should always be done carefully and conscientiously. You must understand this. And number 6, that a scholarly research is brought into limelight with clear demonstration of academic writing skill. This fine-tunes and actually brings a lot of light into our work. And lastly here is that a scholarly research is ethically guided, therefore master all the ethical guidelines for academic integrity. And the last part of this slide, I have some interesting titles I suggested, particularly for our early researchers, which can actually be interesting to all of us in social sciences. Just to mention 1 or 2 of them, I have a handbook on research methodology. The number 2, research method handbook, introductory guide to research methods for social research. The quantitative research method in communication, the power of numbers for social justice. And the last but not the least, the practice of social research. And I have all the authors here. Since I'm going to share the slide with our organizers, I feel that they are going to make the slide available to all our participants. So this very note, I want to thank the organizer for this opportunity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir, for that complete statement. We sincerely appreciate you. I'll move to Professor Saibu now. Your concluding thought, please.
Thank you very much. Dr. Semiu, thank you very much for that beautiful contributions. You have actually said all I wanted to include in my presentation, and I thank you for that. Let me quickly mention this area that I think we have not touched, and that is the area of abstract, as it has to do with the sciences. Now you have done the work, you are about to give the report. Majority of the researchers do not know that abstract is quite different from the summary. They always think if they are asked to write abstract, what they are asked to do is to write the summary. It's beyond writing a conclusion of your work. Yes, it is supposed to be a concise summary, but summary that enables readers to quickly assess the contents and direction of your paper. So in other words, it's a summary of your literature review, it's a summary of your materials and method, it is a summary of your result and discussion, you know, and it is a summary of the conclusion itself. So it is very important for us to note that abstract is expected to be brief, around 5% of the total. That is what it should be. Usually, it must be written in a single paragraph. Though I know recently that some institutions and some journals do allow writers to write their abstracts in paragraph based on different contents in paragraph. But this is not the common style. The common style is that it is usually written in a single paragraph and should cover the scope and purpose of the research that you have carried out. And a way of wrapping it up, for you to know, is my abstract well written or not? In fact, this is the way I mark abstracts of my students. All I do is to subject the abstracts to these questions, 3 questions. Why, how, what? Why, how, and what? Why? Why have you carried out the work? So that automatically is telling you that give us a summary of your literature work. How? How have you done it? Of course, that is telling you to give a summary of your materials and method. And what? Do what in this case? What? What are your results? What have you found out? Then the last what? What is your conclusion? So at times, if I read through your abstract, I should be able to get details of all you have written. So a well-written abstract will automatically will have given a direction about the research work you have carried out. So that I say that the best way to learn how to write a good abstract is to read some published abstracts. I've mentioned this at the beginning. You must not be lazy to read. If you want to be a good researcher, you must be a good reader. If you want to be a good researcher, a good writer, you must be a good reader. You do not just read 1, 2, 3 journal articles around your area and you will feel that you have read or not. That is not it. You must read wide so that your knowledge also will be very wide. Finally, I want to give this tip. I call it ILMRAD structure, ILMRAD. The I stands for introduction in your research work. Introduction. I stands for introduction. And that must answer why are you doing this research work, or why have you done it? So if your I, if you cannot get answer to the why, then you have not written a good introduction. L in the preliminary structure stands for literature review. The literature review must answer how far. That is, in this research you want to do, have you situated yourself in the body of that field? Where have they stopped? What are you adding? We should be able to get that in your literature review. The M in the preliminary structure, it stands for methods. And the methods answer when, where, how much. Let me repeat that. The methods answer when, where, how much. We must be, if you ask any of these questions around your methodology, we must get answer. And R in the preliminary structure stands for result. Results must always answer what? What are your results? What have you obtained in the course of your research? And finally, the D in the preliminary structure stands for discussion. Discussion answers, so what? Yes, we have gotten some data, you have a set of data, and so what? So what here means, have you been able to discuss them? It is not enough for you to come with a lot of data, but you must be able to also give a discussion in conjunction with what others have done. If you put all this into consideration, I'm doubly sure that we would have carried out a very good research, and we would have given a very good report of our research. Don't let me repeat what I have here about how to reference and the likes. All these have been covered by the former speaker. It is on these I want to thank you for having me on this webinar. And I also hope that the material I have here is going to be made available to those in charge, and probably for those of us in need, we can also get it from them. Thank you very much.